Hello everyone and welcome to Handmade Hero, where we code complete game live on stream. I don't know what we're going to do today because it's been a long time since we've been back. We were on winter break, it's been a couple weeks. And here's the thing, I'm in the middle of some 4-coder modifications. So we also are going to have to talk about that sometime soon. Next weekend, I will be completely done with them. I'm almost done now. But I don't want to go over and cover like how all the new stuff works, just to bring people up to speed on what's going on so they can follow until then. So there might be some weirdness, and also it's some of the stuff is half-baked right now. Like on this machine, I think I haven't copied the latest one over yet. So it's still the one that we did a stream over the week where I kind of showed 4-coder modification stuff that I was doing. So we still kind of have the older version here, so I apologize for that. But again, it's in the middle of an upgrade, and so we'll talk about that a little bit more next weekend when all that stuff's done. I'll go over kind of what's in there and how that works now. More importantly, though, over winter break, this was really the biggest news, and it only just happened a couple days ago. So George Menhorn actually got in touch with me and said that Remedy, the debugger that he'd been working on, was starting to get ready for prime time. And as you know, one of the biggest things that I find really grating about development is having to use Visual Studio. It's really just difficult to work with. And there's so many reasons for that. We've talked about it many times, but it's basically like it's very slow and cumbersome, and it requires this massive install. It has a weird licensing regime that constantly decides it's unlicensed, and you have to deal with that, and all these sorts of things. And, you know, install SQL Server on your machine. I mean, it's absurd, right? Like, the amount of stuff that you have to go through just to get a debugger is kind of crazy. But, you know, there haven't been a lot of alternatives to it. Anyway, I took a look at Remedy, which was the debugger that George's been working on. And I am pleased to report that it's looking, like, really solid. And so I thought today I might sort of go over that a little bit as a sort of warm-up to get us back into the groove of things. And just see, can we switch to that on stream now? It's very reasonably priced for anyone else who wants to switch with me. And so if it turns out to be, you know, useful, this is an easy thing to afford. Much cheaper than Visual Studio, which costs thousands of dollars or something if you want the professional license. It is available here. Here is the thing. So it's remedybg.itch.io. I don't know why there's a slash that. Like, it seems like you should be able to do that, but I don't know. Maybe not. So anyway, this is the URL for purchase. For some reason, it's name your own price. I feel like something like this is worth at least like $50 or something. I paid $50 for it because I was like, that's how much I'll pay easily for a good debugger if it turns out to be good, and it seems like it's going to be good. I should probably send more money. But yeah, so I don't know why it's priced so low, because that's basically free, essentially. So I would recommend paying something, but also, George, this probably should be more than free. Anyway, so if we go in here, we can see the distribution. And the first thing I would point out is, look at how beautiful this looks, right? Like, Visual Studio, they can't even distribute Visual Studio without a virtual machine when they do their previews. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but like when they ship betas of Visual Studio, it comes with a virtual machine that you have to run it in. That's how bad they are at distributing software, right? This, which is a pretty darn good debugger so far, looks as good as Visual Studio. It's one executable that's 5 megs. That's it, right? And that's just like a sight for sore eyes, right? It's like that's something that you can trivially put on your machine. You don't have to worry about it. You can check it into your source code control so you know you have all your previous versions. So if you want to roll back to a version you were using before, you just can. Forget that Visual Studio. That's never going to happen, right? You're never going to roll back to a version in source control. Forget it. So again, just really, really happy to see that. Now I'm going to go ahead and install the latest version. I had put an earlier version on this machine. This is the latest one, 1.3. And I don't have a lot of experience with it yet. I'm kind of early in on it. but it seemed to work quite well. The only thing that didn't have yet is like PDB finding stuff, wasn't quite in there yet. So it didn't really work with PDBs that and exes that are like using PDB alt path and moved or archived from their locations. But it seems to work quite well for stuff that's just left in place. So if the exe or DLL's PDB path that it's got baked into it points to the PDB, seem to work pretty well. We can go ahead and try it out on Handmade Hero. So let's go ahead and load it up, and you can see what I mean. I'm gonna just go ahead and be an optimist here. On 4Coder, I'm gonna go into our bin directory. Well, it's our MISC directory, but our one that's in the path here. You know, we've got msdev in there for launching the debugger. I'm going to go ahead and say that let's just make a remedy.bat file. And what I'm going to do here is just make a thing that calls out to remedy. And let's see here. Yeah, there we go. And so I'm just going to have it so that, you know, let's be optimistic and see if we can't make this into our daily debugger, and then we don't ever have to see Visual Studio again. So there we go. Oops, I gotta have the actual exe name in there. There it is. And for those of you unfamiliar with DOS batch files, I'll just mention it again. %* is just the syntax for saying any parameters that were passed to the batch file on the shell, just pass them through. So this would allow us to, you know, if remedy ends up having a bunch of command line switches that we want to be able to use here and there, that just allows those to get passed through. So you can kind of think of this batch file as the thing that like goes and finds the executable we're running, but also that has that ability to add flags as well, right? Now here's one thing I don't know. I don't know if remedy wants to run in a particular location. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to probably go a little bit further, just a hair further, maybe. Well, see, but this wouldn't, local exe files wouldn't work correctly if I did that. So what I don't know is how remedy puts files on the drive. So I don't know what I'm going to do here exactly. I'll leave it like this for now, and we'll maybe look at that a little bit later. I also think George is tweaking some of that stuff now, so we won't worry about it too much. Okay, so let's see what happens. Let's say we're in the W directory here. I'm just curious what happens if I do remedy like this, and then I close. Yeah, so this is what I was worried about. So it writes this imgui.ini file into wherever it currently is. So what I think I'm going to do for now, I don't think that's good. Like, he should probably change that, because it should probably write that into a more specific location. So what I want to do is I want to kind of guard against that for now until that gets resolved in like a future update. So if I come in here to that remedy file, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to guard it by saying, look, this thing always has to run in its own directory. And we'll deal with it from there. Now, that does mean that anything that you pass on the command line that you thought was going to be relative to where you are isn't actually going to be, and that's unfortunate, but we'll just deal with that because it's better to not leave those imgui files lying around. So this way we'll do a pushd into that directory. We'll start remedy this way so it doesn't lock up our command line, and then we'll go from there. So here we go, and well, let me do that again. So here's remedy again, and I'll close it, and this time it should not have written that file out here, right? And it didn't. So that keeps that properly guarded, and off we go. So that means now, if we're in here and we want to just start this up, we can just start it up. Let's take a look at the actual debugger itself. So you can see across the top, it's got a familiar menu system here, and I do know somewhat how to use it already. I play with it a little bit on my own. Basically what happens is in here you can specify the target information that you want. We want to use Handmade here, obviously, and so that's in our build directory back here. It's Win32 Handmade, right? And so we can put that in there. For command arguments, we don't really have any at the moment. For the working directory, we know that we run inside Handmade, like so. So it looks like that. And one of the nice things is you can just save your session really quickly using one of these RDBG files. You don't have to make a SLN or PRJ or all these weird other different things that it's hard to tell like what refers to what. The RDBG file is just, this is the debug target. So you know you can just save that and have it and you're done. And so one of the nice things about that is I can just maybe in here in our Handmade directory, I might just save that out, you know, I guess to the root. I don't have a lot of opinions maybe about where that needs to go. But maybe we'll put that in the root. Or what I could do is I could put that in a debug directory. We've got this NVIDIA directory and we've got the MSVC proj directory. And so, you know, the other thing I could do is make a remedy specific directory. I don't know how necessary that really is, so I might just make a debug directory and we'll start putting things in there in general. Maybe the NVIDIA stuff will go in there as well, so we don't have to have like lots of directories for this sort of stuff. So once that's in there, oops, what did I do wrong? Oh, I gotta name this thing. So this is like just Win32 Handmade, let's say. So I believe once you do that, if you just close it, if you start it again, I believe you can just go open and then pick it, and then you've got your target set up the way that, you know, however you did. And you can switch between them that way, so it's pretty easy to do exactly like they were an MSVC project or something like that. It should just work, right? And that's really it. The key commands, he's done a nice job mapping them to things you already mostly know. So to launch the app, you can just hit F5 and, you know, it runs. And similarly, you know, it's got all the familiar features. If we break into it, you're pretty much good to go. We can click on but we can see the modules that are loaded in here, and you can see which ones have symbols. They're exactly the ones you'd expect. We don't have symbols installed for the Win32 libraries, so we're just looking at the ones that we've made. The Handmade one, the Win32 OpenGL one, and the Win32 Handmade.exe, right? Those are the components that are running the game at the moment, and they're all loaded, which is exactly what we want. So if we take a look at the call stack for any individual one of these, we got to go to our threads window here. Now, one of the things that I found a little bit confusing, and I don't really remember, to be honest with you, I don't remember why this isn't hard on WinDBG or MSVC. There's some piece of information that's missing here that makes it hard to tell which of these is our threads and which of these are threads created by operating system services. Let's just take a look, because I wanted to send this feedback, but I was like, I don't even really know what I don't even really know what the feedback is. So if I go here to Win32 Handmade .sln, and of course it takes a while to start up because, you know, how could you possibly load that in time? And I run this thing. If I go to the threads window here, so you can kind of see, like, somehow they get this information, right? And it's this name thing. I don't know where exactly that's coming from, but that is really handy, because now I know that these are the thread procs and this is the main thread, and so it's easy for me to jump down in there, right? So that's one thing that would be a nice improvement for MDG. It's one of the only things I noticed when working on it, that I was like, there was something that was a little bit nicer to use in the debuggers I was familiar with already. So anyway, that's a little bit of an issue, and so, you know, the reason that it becomes difficult is you're kind of hunting through here to find these things. And so you look in here, I'm guessing what it is that the other ones hunt upward till they find something they recognize, maybe? To be completely honest with you, I really just don't know. But we can see on here that this is, you know, eventually we can see the one that is ours, and we can, like, look at where it is and all that sort of stuff. Once we've done that, it actually works exactly the same as everything else too. You know, you can just run, and it should be able to break when you stop on things and so on. Although that actually doesn't look like it is at the moment. So maybe I misspoke there. I don't remember having much trouble getting breakpoints to work properly. I wonder what's going on there. Am I in the right place? I think I am. There we go. So let me just see what I can do here. Let me go here. I can single step through things just fine. But it doesn't seem to really want me to be able to set a breakpoint, which is weird because I did this a bunch on my own computer and it was fine. But this definitely doesn't seem to want to. Alright, so maybe this will be a short demo. Like I said, it's still in progress, so I don't know. Although I didn't really have this problem, so I wonder if I've got something more tricky going on with the PDBs on this machine. Let's try setting a breakpoint here. If I look at what my breakpoints are, you can see them right here, right? This one it definitely located. This one it looks like it had trouble doing. Oh, that's because that's not an actual function. That's why. So see, that worked just fine. And so did that. So I don't know what I was having trouble with there. And maybe that's just working out the kinks. You know, like I said, this is very early access at this point. And this is a retail build, so it's the worst possible case as well. But it does look like it's having trouble with breakpoint setting a little bit, at least in this milieu. Because, like, for example, it couldn't single step over that line, which meant that it wasn't able to set a breakpoint anywhere in here, which I assume has something to do with, again, like that sort of code problem. So let me take a quick look at whether that's release mode issues or not, because I'm curious now too. So let me go into Handmade code. Let's go ahead and open up for coder here, and I just want to change this build.bat to an OD. So it's going to be a debug build. And then in here, I'm going to go ahead and run that build and just have everything rebuilt for debug mode. I just want to see if it behaves any differently here. I'm not sure if it will or not, but... so here's us restarting, same place. I'm going to step through this and see now if it still has the same problem with stepping as it had before. And if you remember correctly, it basically, when I got down to the sound area here, it wasn't able to continue single stepping over that. And it looks like it's having no trouble with that sort of thing now. So, yeah, I want to say that maybe the problem with... What is it doing? Oh, never mind. It didn't do anything. I want to say that maybe he's still got some bugs with how to figure out where to set the breakpoint for the next line in a release mode build. That'd be my guess, because this looks just fine. And similarly, I'm assuming now I could reset those breakpoints for what I wanted before that I was having trouble. So I wanted to set a breakpoint like here. Yeah, and that works just fine. So my guess is it may not be quite ready for the release mode builds yet, for whatever reason. Again, I'm going to try and put together a big list of things to send to George. It's like, here's all the things I noticed. So that's one. The nice part about that is if it repros in Handmade Hero, it's pretty easy to point him at it. Just be like, here's Handmade Hero. Go nuts. And so hopefully that's something that can get straightened out pretty easily. So let's go ahead and continue on just with this a little bit more. So it works the same way as you would expect in terms of being able to organize your windows, which is nice. The only difference is, like, for some reason, memory and registers are not enabled by default, probably because they're not enabled by default in Visual Studio, and he was trying to clone that experience, which is great, by the way. Giving people what they expect is really good because it just eases their transition. But obviously, I'm going to want those on. So I turn all of those on, first of all. And then these things can be peeled around exactly as you would expect. So basically, like, you know, you can gather things up if you want to, and they just create little tabs exactly as you would expect, right? And so now it's just a question of, well, how do I want to make this window arrangement work? And one of the things that I actually like that he did here is he doesn't use mixed mode assembly and source, which is what Visual Studio does. He does a separate disassembly window and source window. So as you step through, you can see both of them together. I do actually prefer this. That's WinDBG style. So that's the way WinDBG works. Visual Studio and WinDBG work differently. The reason I like that better is because most of the time, if I'm stepping through the disassembly for anything serious, if I'm stepping through disassembly just because there's some weird thing I wanted to look at real quick, then it doesn't matter. I don't care which one I have. But if I'm stepping through disassembly because something is actually important, usually I'm in, and I'm going to look at it for a while, usually I'm in release mode because the disassembly for debug mode is usually irrelevant, right? It's storing the stack all the time. Like, you wouldn't really be looking at disassembly because it's garbage. So it's only if there's some weird compiler bug you need to track down or something, right? You're usually not going to be looking at the disassembly. So if I'm looking at disassembly, I'm usually going to be in release mode. And in release mode, the correspondence of the disassembly with the source is pretty bad. Like, it's usually not very good. And so I don't really like having it intermixed with the source because it makes it harder to read, actually. So I want to be able to see them both, but I don't really want them interleaved because usually it does not actually correct. It doesn't actually add to the information, it detracts from it. So having them both is great. So I can be like, oh, okay, I see. It thinks I'm roughly around here, although I'm not really, exactly there. Now let's look at the disassembly. That actually works quite well for me. Like, I like that. And so I actually agree with this decision, and I would say stick with that, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and organize our windows. As you know, I kind of like to have the watch window on the side. So I'm going to go ahead and, sort of peel over here the watch window. And I don't know exactly how I want this stuff organized. We'll kind of see in a second. But we're going to want something like this. So I'm going to want the watch window up there. And I'm probably going to want things like modules and threads and all that stuff into a separate window over here on this side. And I'll try to put the least, normally I would use this slot. I can't because my head's there when we're doing streaming. So that makes it a little harder to organize. But we'll get by, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and put the breakpoints window over here as well. And I'm going to put the call stack over here and probably the threads as well. I usually need to be able to see the call stack and the threads at the same time. So I might try to do something where, like, the call stack is like over here, right? And the threads are over here. Maybe something like that. I'm not sure, right? But something like that probably. So anyway, the output and the disassembly can probably go here together. Registers probably wants to be over here as well, so we can switch to that. I don't know. It's hard to say. Memory can probably go over here somewhere. Let's say there. And modules can probably go up there as well, because these are things that we use less frequently. So that's all fine. Again, don't know if this is really the organization I'll use, but something like this is probably what we want. So that's all. And as you would expect, everything else seemed to work pretty good. So up here, I can do button index and see it. It's pretty good, right? It just does exactly what you expect. Compound types seem to work quite nicely. So new keyboard controller. If I want to look at it, it seemed like I could look at things just fine. All of that seemed to be fine. And it seemed like I could step through them and so on. So a couple things I'm not sure about. I don't know if it has the same kind of problems as Visual Studio. Like, for example, if you're inside a block and you want to look at something, let me see if I can get to a block that has some local variables in it that are relevant. So yeah, let's see. I guess this is fine. Yeah, we're really just not. We need it. Okay. So audio wall clock would be an example, right? Audio wall clock. So if I want to look at audio wall clock, here it is. And once it goes out of scope, I want to keep looking at it. Which in debug mode is very easy because it's still in the stack in the same place, so it should be easy to look at. And so it looks like that's another thing. I should really be writing these down. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let me just go ahead and start a little list here on my other machine. Got to type on the right keyboard if you want it to actually work. So I'm going to go ahead and start a list here to George so that he can get these. So, okay, so far we found release mode breakpoints seem spotty. And stuff that just went out of scope isn't visible anymore. Again, that's exactly the same as Visual Studio, so not a reason not to switch because you have that problem in your case. It's just something that I know can be done better. And so now that there's a debugger that looks like it's going to be better, it'd be a great feature to have, right? Very, very nice. So anyway, as we come through here, like I said, don't think there's that much to look at. I mean, it just kind of works exactly like Visual Studio, and there's not really much else you need to know. Let's try to set a breakpoint somewhere. I don't know where we want to set a breakpoint. Let's look at some other code in here. If I just open up some code randomly that we've got, maybe we want to look at some of the entity code, let's say, because we were looking at some of that stuff. So maybe we want to set a breakpoint right here, let's say. Can I run there? Yes, I can. Everything looks good. Also, I would notice, I would point out, the responsiveness of this thing is great. It's not like Visual Studio where you hit the step button and you can look at your watch and go get a cup of tea before it finishes updating like the watch window. It's like right away, which is really nice. So again, really nice work on that. Just demonstrating what we already knew to be true, which is that these things don't have to be slow. It's only if it's Visual Studio that it's slow. So one thing I would point out is there probably should be a keyboard shortcut for expanding this stuff, and there doesn't seem to be, so I'm going to add that to the list as well. So let's say keyboard expand collapse of watch window compounds. I don't know what it should be, but like right arrow or return or something. And so stepping through here, yeah, again, like looking at some of this stuff, you can see it. I want to see how it gets updated and just make sure that that seems to be working. So let's say I open up match vector. Oops, this helps if I type it correctly. Why can't I, how do I edit that? Or can I not edit that? Because that would be another thing that... Yeah, so it doesn't look like I can change these, maybe. I can only delete them. So I feel like they should be editable. So let me go ahead and add that. And once I've got one of those in here, let's see if I open one that's fairly large here. So there we go. Here we're gonna, that's supposed to clear, and it did. That's good. And then we've got one of them that's gonna get set, although it may be getting set to, let's see, entity facing direction. Can I inspect a particular one? So it looks like it's kind of hard to inspect variables there, like I say entity facing direction, but it doesn't know how to do that deref, maybe. So I think maybe he doesn't have a parser yet in here, so that's another thing that would have to go in there. Unless I'm wrong about that. Let me see here. T, facing direction. So that's 0, and that's why it didn't show up in there. So the weight vector, let's see if that gets updated properly. Oops. Again, so not being able to edit those is tough because I misspell things too often. But that shouldn't be very hard to add, I wouldn't think. All right, so let's see if this updates to 1. Yeah, it did. So I think that's all good. So I'll put in there, what do we want to say there, that like dereferences have to work. So like entity member, and also changed values should be in red, something like that. So I think that's most of what we would be doing in here. all of that seems fine. What I will say is this stack window looks a lot better than the Visual Studio stack window. Like you get all those nice parameters in there. I think you can turn some of that on in Visual Studio, but I don't think it's quite as complete. The module name I'm going to kind of get rid of here a little bit more because we don't really need that. And since my head is blocking too much of the screen, I think we'll just leave it like that so we can kind of see. But that's kind of nice, you know, that you get all of those on there. What I will say is that it does make it so that it's a little bit difficult to see all of the things that you, like if you just want to see the stack more concisely, it might be nice if you could turn that off. So I don't think there's any setting for that, but that would be a nice thing. Let's see. Breakpoints still seem pretty good. I don't know. So I guess what I would say is I suspect that at the moment there's no hardware breakpoints, and that will probably have to get added. I don't tend to rely on hardware breakpoints very often. I can tell ahead of time too that this is probably going to have to go up here because I can't see it there. Get me all my registers. Yeah. I can kind of tell that the breakpoint stuff needs to get more robust too. Again, probably, like I said, this is early, so it's probably just not at the top of his list. But basically, like data breakpoints and conditional breakpoints. At some point, you got to get those in there because for more tricky for more difficult scenarios, you start to have like stuff for that, right? It's nice that by the way, it's nice that these are separate for step into instruction and step over instruction versus line. All right, so I think I've got a nice healthy set of things here. I would say probably the other thing that I suspect that it doesn't do at the moment that we're going to need it to do is casting. So like in here, right, where we say something like, what's a good example? So traversable index is, oops, well, that's not where we are. So let's say we were here. Although it looks like I'm never going to quite get there. How do I don't actually know how to unset that breakpoint. Oh. Oh, that's interesting. So for some reason, it treats this breakpoint as occurring here. That seems a little off. I think there's something off about the PDB parsing there. Oh, duh. It's because it's an if zero block. I'm an idiot. Let's try this. There we go. Yeah, sorry, George. That was my fault. All right, so in here, if I look at color, and I, let's say want to look at this as a, this X value here. If I want to, well, I guess I can't really do it, but let's say I want to look at that as an array of integers or something, I'm assuming that you can't put expressions in here. Yeah. So basically, like this, for the same reason you can't look at like entity arrow P, which, we'd kind of need to be able to do, or like entity facing direction was the one I tried, right? It's going to need to be able to parse those expressions and give you something for a limited set of expressions, right? It doesn't need to be able to do every single one. But that's relatively tricky because, the types that can go in here are the types of the program, so you have to be able to get those out of the PDB and all that sort of stuff. So that's a pretty big one. They'll have to happen at some point. So let's see. Expressions in watch window for casting, listing arrays of things, etc. So that one kind of needs to go a little further. And I guess I don't know, memory window. So some of these things have right-click menus. So this one had one there, right? In the memory window, it looks the same. So you can sort of, I don't know what, oh, I see. So if I, oh, it's double-click. Does that work in here too? No. So that's kind of nice that you can set the number of columns. It looks like you can sort of have some nice highlighting there. That's kind of nice too. What's hexy? I don't actually think I know what hexy is. Well, let's see if we can find out. Is hexy just ASCII if it's ASCII and hex if it's not? Like ASCII if it's a normal letter and hex if it's not, maybe? Otherwise, I'm not sure what that is. So for the memory window, I don't know exactly how it works. Let's try it. So let's suppose I put entity in here. Oh, okay, so it looks like it only does addresses. So maybe you have to do... So you have to type the address manually. 262123 A9058. A9058. Okay. I see. So basically, well, I'll be honest, I don't really know what hexy is still. I guess it's sort of the thing that I was thinking of. It shows the letters if they are letters, otherwise it doesn't. Okay, so I would say this thing kind of needs to... Oh, I like that, though. I would say this thing also kind of needs to be able to have an easier way of getting stuff in here. Because at the moment, like, if I wanted to cut and paste into there, how would I get the value, right? Because I can't copy this. Like, there's no way to actually get that value in here, right? So... there kind of needs to be ways to, you know, like edit those values. Like, trying to think of anything else we haven't really put through its paces. Oh, and I forgot to put into here too the like thread window should use last symbol name found, so you can see which it is which. And that I think maybe that. This is not 0010. So I think that may be just about it. And so yeah, like looking at it and just playing around with it a bit, I think it's not quite ready because of just some of those things like I would say the breakpoints in release mode need to get more stable, and then this window needs to work with expressions more. That's most of it. Maybe some way to pick the threads better, but that's mostly it. A lot of the other stuff I listed there are things that I would be okay without, like I could get by, and not having to install Visual Studio would be enough for me. Like that, I would easily make that trade. So I think this is in pretty good shape. Like I'm pretty optimistic that this would be easy to replace Visual Studio with for most of the things I do without that much more stuff that needs to happen. So that's pretty encouraging. Really nice work on that, George. That's coming along really nicely. It seems pretty stable, hasn't crashed on me or anything here, which is good. You know, you don't want your debugger adding to your debug woes. And everything else seems pretty good. So I think we've got a good list there to send him. And I'd say we could just call that a win. And we could probably use this a little bit too for Handmade Hero. The watch window would really be the major blocking factor, and maybe those release mode breakpoints. But a lot of times when we step in the debugger, we compile in debug mode, so I'm not sure that would matter very much. So it would really mostly be the fact that the watch window is a little harder to use because it can't handle those expressions. I think if we got expressions in here, I think we would pretty much be good to go. I think that would pretty much do it for us. All right, so that's pretty encouraging. We've already got our own editor handmade, and now it looks like we're going to have our own handmade debugger too. It's looking pretty good. We even have our own handmade drawing package. We just need someone to make a handmade compiler, I guess. Well, I guess we need a handmade operating system too, but you know, what can you do? All right, so thanks very much, George, for all of that hard work there. It looks great. We'll send off this list of feedback. Hopefully, some of the more pressing ones aren't too hard to add. I don't really know. The expression one and the watch window part. I mean, the nice thing about that is you can sort of hack in the basic stuff. So just like basic casting and basic dereferencing. That's most of it, right? You don't have to go down a huge rabbit hole to make some super elaborate expression parsing, blah, 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 right? And so I guess what I would say there is that, like, you know, maybe starting off with something simple that just gets us enough so that we can switch. Then later, you know, you can spend the time and do some more elaborate, real expression parsing and do all kinds of fancy stuff. So I'll go ahead and send that off to George a little later. I want to go ahead and polish up that email. It's kind of just little jot down things as I thought of them. And I'll have to clean it up a little bit. But yeah. All right. So that's great. I'm pretty happy about that. If you're interested in that debugger, again, if you want to purchase a copy yourself, you can into Google type remedy BG and then hit return. That will bring up this page, which is the page on Handmade Network for it, which does have the forums. Again, this is the purchase link, so you can go buy it here. And then, again, for giving feedback, this is the place. So the forums, you can go here and start threads. Nicholas Lindberg also looks like he was working on it here. He's already got some of this. In fact, here's the imgui.ina one that we were talking about. So that's, that's just another like kind of good example of people already starting to find these things. So yeah, pick up a copy of that, find bugs, make suggestions, send them back here. And George, this should not be free. There's a lot of work that went into this. Charge something for it. All right, so let's go do some regular programming today, because I feel like we might as well try to get our feet wet a little bit here. If I remember correctly, we had like in the streams that we were working on just before we left for winter break, we'd kind of gone through here, and we had gone through all of the GitHub issues that we'd had, and we tried to like clean them up as best we can, get rid of bugs that we knew we could fix, and so on, right? And so we've got a few more in here. Martin's Mosaico, as he always does, finds stuff for us as well, and so there's a new one here that he opened. Kim was trying to get things working on Mac, but Mac's OpenGL is so poor at this point, I don't think it's ever going to. I think we're going to have to do a Metal version for Mac, so I don't know how much we really care about some of these OpenGL problems, because, like I said, OpenGL is kind of not... OpenGL and Vulkan, I think, are kind of dead. I think that's just... forget about them. So we're probably going to have to do a metal D3D thing at some point, which won't be that hard. We've got our render completely isolated, so switching over to a different backing API is not the end of the world. So anyway, a couple of things that we do want to do, though, is I think we want to talk about the downloads, the different ways that the SendOwl downloads work now. Because I basically went in and have the HHAs so that they can be downloaded directly now, and you don't have to worry about that so much anymore. And so what I wanted to do as a very simple thing is change the README file because now it's out of date and it doesn't actually refer to what's going on. So you can see here we have one that basically says, how things are going, and then we need to say here how this stuff should be set up. Now, this test assets zip doesn't really get unpacked in there, so we kind of need to talk about this a little bit more specifically. So we don't need to build the asset pack files anymore. So what we need to say instead, and we also need to change this, right? Let's see. Right, so that's supposed to look like this. So we just want to say, look, you gotta have the art files in there. So I think that's all good. And what we need to now do is describe step 3, which is like how you set these up. So in step 3, we want to describe how you unpack this stuff so that people can do that. And what you really need in here in the data directory, right, is you just need these HHAs, right? You just need that. And all of those are already exported. So you just need those. And then inside the art directory, I guess we're going to need a step for that. You want to put these PNGs, right? But I think... So there's a couple different things to do here, and we're a little bit premature on this. It might be nice to go ahead and push to get ourselves to a place where we just rebuild from PNGs 100% correctly, and then we just distribute the PNGs and off we go, right? And so, that way you can do a full art build pretty easily just by, letting the game import everything. Or whatever, that sort of thing. So maybe we want to push towards that a little bit and say something more like this. So in here we would just say, okay, let me actually also look. While we're at it, I'm going to look at what SendOwl actually has for us here, because I don't actually know the answer to that question. But I would like to basically, I would like to get it to the point where it's easier for new people to come on board, because we haven't really done that in a while. And as we are wrapping up engine stuff and moving towards gameplay stuff, there's probably people who might come along and want to follow along with that, who haven't followed along with the rest. And it's just... if you haven't been following along, you can't really build the game because we haven't done any work to make that happen. It assumes you followed us the whole way, right? If you want to build the art assets. The code can always be built, but the art assets are like a different story. So let me go ahead and just take a look at the SendOwl downloads here. Where is that? So... oh, Linux multiple desktops. You can't see right now, thankfully, me struggling with Linux multiple desktops, which of course I set up and then get confused by. Let's see. So if I want to go to My sendal download. That's gonna be here somewhere. And I guess I also have to sign in. Yeah. And like I said, I just kind of want to know, at this point, I want to know like that people can get like up and running with Handmade Hero more easily, and so we might just do some work on that. And we also need that anyway, because it's nice to just clean up the art path there, and make sure that that everything is, you know, is buttoned up. We had some things we wanted to do there, if you remember correctly. We kind of wanted to make it so that like the markup was in text files and so on. Okay, so let me see if I can get back to their orders. Let's see. Go to the download URL. So currently we've got Handmade Hero latest art and data and Handmade Hero latest source code. The latest source code just builds out of the box as far as I know. The latest art and data, when you download it, I'm just going to take a look at what exactly is in there and make sure that we refer to it a little bit more cleanly. So we'll get that going. But yeah, I think what we want to do then, let's just say that what our goal is going to be for the next couple weekends is to get ourselves completely clean rebuilding. And I'll post a new set of PNGs where you basically just download a zip of the PNGs. That's all of that. And then that will just build, right? And what we can do is we can export those text files, like I was saying, that have the markup for things in them. We'd want to do that anyway. We can just lean on that as a system that allows us to augment the PNGs with what we need, and then everyone can rebuild them. So at the moment, it looks like we supplied the exact art and data files. So, okay, so this is easier than I thought. So for the time being, though, what we'll say is of the Handmade latest art and data zip must go into the W Handmade art and W Handmade data directories. Right? So that looks good. You know, can we also, while we're in here, talk about how to unpack the code? So if I download the source code, that has like, you know, a zip file in it, code type, yeah. So you know what? Maybe we can talk about this a little bit differently. Maybe we can simplify this a little bit. So maybe we say, look, the way directories, you can try out the video. First, unpack the Handmade Hero Day, Hero Day Hero, what is this called? Latest art and data. How's this? And so inside that Handmade Hero source directory, just looking at that as well, so there's like a bunch of other things in there as well, and we don't really care about those necessarily. So I won't go out of my way to describe those. But so we can say, look, unpack one of the source zips in here. That looks fine. That all looks fine. To build the game, you're going to need this installed, and you can build it and run build.bat, and that will build it into wbuild. And then to run the game, all this stuff is correct, right? You have to be in the Handmade directory, and then you have to run the executable. That all looks right. All right, so let's just leave that for now, and then eventually I think we can probably simplify things down a little bit by making it so that you don't actually have to deal with this directory anymore. You'll just unpack PNGs, and it'll build the HSAs automatically into the data directory as necessary. That seems fine. And so, yeah, I think that's all good. I think that's all good. That way people don't have to worry about the asset build at all now, and hopefully that'll just be a little bit clearer for them. So anyway, let's talk a little bit more about getting this the PNG stuff set up kind of more the way that I would prefer. Because we've kind of gotten almost all the way there, and we might as well just finish up, right? All right, so let me switch this back. Yeah, so that's all good, and now we're happy, and everyone is shiny and happy and smiling. All right, so what I want to do now is just take a look at the way this is working. So, if we run things and we think about how this is going, and by the way, this is kind of nice. So Visual Studio, we may not have to deal with this very much longer. That debugger was looking pretty close. I don't want to get too excited because, maybe it just won't work out. But I'd like to get to the point where, oops, that's not what I wanted. I'd like to get to the point where we could get rid of it, and that would be just really exciting. So, I'm really hoping, but we'll see. So anyway, let's go ahead and talk about some stuff that we want to do here. I'm going to go ahead and set this back to optimized build for now. So anyway, if we go ahead and run the code at the moment, we just think about what's going on. If you look at the current situation, we have a couple things that are I think pretty important for us to just address before we actually go start layering a ton of game stuff in here. One is the lighting, which is that our lighting just kind of needs to be probably simplified a little. And, right now we even have the volume set to be too small, so you can see that it doesn't even cover everything that you can possibly zoom out to see. You can see our lighting boundary there. And so I think we need to kind of simplify our lighting to not be quite so aggressive as it is. And, because we were doing kind of full, global illumination, and we maybe need to back off to something that's a little bit more representational, just because, we did what we could. So we want to be able to make it so that runs nice and fast and is as large as the visible region is always. And then the other thing that we want to do, like I said, is address the problem with the art assets right now, which is that we kind of just haven't quite finished that process of storing the metadata in text files that can be regenerated. And so what I'd like to do is focus on that part, I think, mostly. Let's get that part straightened out, and then let's go simplify our lighting. And then let's call it a day, because I don't know that there's very much else. Maybe there's one other thing we should do, which is sound, because we have our sound in sort of a half-baked state. Let's finish that out. And then I think we can call the engine done, because, we're pretty close, right? We can make a list of things right now, but it's looking like, you could build a game with this pretty easily. We should also re-enable our sprite sorting stuff. So like that doesn't happen anymore with the clipping. That we remember we have Z bias in there to fix that. It's turned off right now. So a couple quick things. I think we do have a couple days of solid work to do, but we're looking really good coming back from winter break. It's pretty exciting. I mean, this is an engine we built entirely ourselves, fully streaming, dynamic lighting, infinite size worlds, effectively, no loading screens. Like I don't know, man. Like. Pat yourselves on the back if you followed us this far, because we've done like an entire engine from scratch for reals. No joke. Not a single library in sight, right? Yeah, it's pretty good. We do have to replace sine and cosine, though. We are still using the C runtime to write sine and cosine. We can't claim complete victory till sine and cosine are gone. So I don't know. Looking pretty darn good, I would say. And so... Again, just a few things we want to button up there, and then we can just start focusing on world building and stuff, which will build this out into a game pretty quickly. Because, yeah, I mean, that's mostly what a game is. So anyway, I think that's pretty good, and I'd like to get started on that. So let's start with just the basics here. I would like to go ahead and look into what it's going to take for us to transition. So basically right now we only have a way of storing things in HHA files. I'd like to go ahead and see what we can do to transition over to storing things as sort of textual markup that we can use. And I'd like to separate those out. So one of the things I want to do here is say, look, inside that Handmade directory, we've got art, and that I want to consider as input from the art team. So actually what I'd like to do is not this. Right? I don't actually want this to be with the art assets necessarily. And the reason for that is that I would like those to be separate. And so what I think I might do is start to pull away from this structure a little bit and make it so that a data pack is basically two things. It's a set of text files and a set of PNG files and WAV files that go together, and that way we can package up the text files with the source code, and the PNGs can be shipped separately. And that's just for our purposes, because every night I upload all the source code. I don't want to re-upload giant 3 GB art packs or something, right? And so I think that's really, mostly the problem there. So I'd like to go ahead and do that and push towards that a little bit much. And so maybe we kind of start to talk about a slightly different structure that will occur here. And so we've got sort of this data, and those are the HHA files that come in here. And here's the art, and maybe this wants to look a little bit more sort of compacted there. I'm not exactly sure how we want to do that. Give me a name. What do we call these? Like source packs? It's sort of like, pretend you were going to be shipping a mod for Handmade Hero. What would you call the package? It's like a data pack or something like this. But there's two versions of it. There's an HHA, which you can just ship by itself, and someone can install it and play. But then if someone wants to edit that, what do you call it? What do you call it, folks? We need a name. It's source material. Maybe call them sources. And so one of the ideas I had in here was if we had sources or whatever, right? And I make something here that's like the base pack. What I was thinking is previously we sort of had this loose notion, and I didn't really have any way to do it inside the source code because I didn't really know what to do. But before, when we were building things, everything went into the core HHA file, right? So like you make a local HHA file and it would just pack everything into there. But what I was thinking is what we could do instead is if we have a directory like sources here, then what that could do is every one of these, like base or whatever, inside here, all of your stuff that you want, like, you know, we could have art, sound, music, and, you know, markup or something. Maybe the markup goes in the outside, right? So inside the sources directory, if we made one of these, then you could imagine other people's doing this, which is like, and maybe we even do this just to make sure that it works right. So you've got sort of these things that are like sources that, you know, like this is the intro cutscene. And this is the base, you know, game or whatever. And when we do a rebuild, each directory inside the sources directory, we would then compile into an HHA here. So we it would no longer have to think about the like what goes into the local, or it's like the directory structure on the drive gets packed individual HHAs, so that it's easier for people to create their own additional packs, because they just create the data structure that goes, the directory structure that goes to that pack, and then it just gets packed in automatically to one that corresponds to that directory structure, right? Because I was struggling with that. I don't know if you remember, but when we did that, I was like, I don't know, where should it go? I guess if you create a local HHA, it goes in there, right? And so I feel like this would be a really good way to solve that problem, you know? And I just didn't think of it at the time. So it wasn't like I didn't do it because, you know, I wanted to do the other thing first. I just didn't think of it. I think this is a much better way. And so if we imagine creating something that works in this way, then I think we can sort of get ourselves into that position. Now, one of the things that's a problem, too, that I thought of that we don't need to do and we can work around now, is if you look at what happens here, the way that I chose to solve the problem of how to tag things was by changing the file names. But what I realized is that's not that good, because if the artists want to export new file names, they name things whatever they want, and they're not going to keep these names, right? They're just going to give us a new set of source files. So what we would rather do is stick that, I think, this into the text files, right? So when we go into the sources, you know, and we look in here, the text files that would have things like hotspots, we'll just keep the tags in for the things as well, right? And so I think that's all we really need to do. A bunch of busy work there that we're going to have to actually do, but I think that'll work quite nicely. And so I wish I had kept the original names on these things. And I may go back and try to find the original set there too, just to see, like, and in fact, maybe I'll just get that right now, because I think the Sendowl page still has those in the old downloads. So maybe we switch back to the old names and we make the text file do the work, right? And again, I think that's just a nice way to go down that road. All right, so let me try that and see if that works. So up here on the download page, you know, there's this old legacy files directory. And we've got the legacy art files download. And in that legacy art files download, I think that's got a lot of that stuff that we would want there. And you know, the other thing that I'm thinking too is we can dump that HHA out into how should I put it, into PNGs for the intro art as well, and we can import all those as well. I might not want to do that. I might ask Anna to clean those up for us too, because they were kind of, the ones from Yangshan still had like some weird like places where the alpha was not what you would expect. and stuff. So we might want to clean those up, and because while we're at it, basically. So if I look at the PNG art packs, yeah. So I've got the ones with the original names here, the like head, body, and stuff ones. Yeah. So let's just grab those. Let's just grab those as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop over to this machine, put the thumb drive in there, and I'm just gonna grab those off of that, and then we can go from there. So let's grab, and you can do this at home too if you're in the mood, right? Because like I said, this is up on the Handmade Hero download page. So Santas can be removed. That's good. And let's pop back. All right. So here's that legacy art file. So let's say we go in here and we go to sources, and I unpack this thing, and I say, all right, PNG art packs, you're going into base game. Come on, open. All right, maybe not. So we want to put that into base game art. And if I remember correctly, we separated characters into body and head, so we don't really need this anymore. Right, those can go. And then I'll close this guy out here. And so looking at this, right, this is the original name for stuff like that we had in there. And you can see that there's quite a bit of difference there between that and what we actually named them to get them tagged properly. Which is in here, we've got, if you look at our current art directory, right, you can see like this is called Block Forest 01, but it's not called that at all. I think it's called Block Floor Grass, right? You know what I mean? And so what we want to do is preserve Anna's names for these things, right? And I think we can do that pretty easily, like I said, by just using text files to describe them. And I don't know exactly how we want to do that. But I'm guessing that we could just, it's probably easiest to just put this in one file, I think. Can you think of a reason not to? I can't really think of a reason not to. The bonus of spamming tons of text files into the directory, because we could do this two ways. I'm just going to point out what they both are. One way is we have a text file for every PNG, right? So basically, we would create for Block Forest 01, we would create a text file that mirrors Block Forest 01. So we'd say blockforest01.txt. And in there, we would put this information. So we would say the Block Forest 01 has the block, floor, and grass tags, right? And in addition, anything else we want to say about it. The other way is we would just have a single text file, and that text file would list all of the files that we want, right? The bonus of doing one text file is just easier to work with. You can just open it one text file in your editor and search for the thing you were trying to edit, right? It's easier and quicker. The thing that's harder about it is it doesn't play as nicely potentially with, say, source code control, two people making changes at the same time. You now have to like merge those text files together. And so it's hard to say which of those ones you want to do, right? Since I think Handmade Hero is more of a small team, small focus kind of a project, right? It's not a AAA, we have 3,000 people working on this project like Red Dead Redemption 2 or something like this, where literally the amount of time it takes to watch the credits for Red Dead Redemption 2 is like longer than it takes to actually play like the game Red Dead Redemption 2 because there's just that many people who worked on it. I don't know that we really care about that merge problem. So I think I want to go with just single text file because that just makes it easier. You know what I mean? So let's try that. And if we run into problems, it's not that hard to later split it out, right? And furthermore, we can make our game load all the text files that are in that directory and process them. So if somebody did want to make one per thing, they could, right? So we're certainly not going to stop anyone from doing that. I just don't think I'm going to take that tack. So let's see we were going to do that. So let's say inside the Handmade directory, we go to the sources here and we say, look, there's this base game directory and here it is. And I'm going to say like this is like basegame.txt or whatever, right? And so it's got, you know, information here about what this actually is. And so what I'll do is I'll in here mention like also a note, Casey, these are the assets for the base game and you know, base game, the in-game assets for the base game. And then we would also have another one that was intro cutscene text, and that would be like these are the assets for the introduction cutscene. And in each of these, we just want to list the PNGs. This one I can't do yet because we haven't downloaded PNGs for those. So we just want this to occur. So what I want to do is I want to merge this with this. So the way I'm going to do that to make it a little easier on myself is I'm just going to use the command line here. Because even though the DOS command line is kind of crappy, it still is better than nothing. It's certainly no Linux command line by a long shot, but still. If I go into that art directory, you can see here's all of the art files that we have right now with their names. If I want to, I can look. The dir command actually has, you can see here, options on controlling how the output goes. So if all I want to do is just get those names in here, I can use what's called the bare directory listing, which is dir/b. And you can see here, hopefully, right? Do you see how it just lists them all out for me like that? And so if I want to, I can do a dir/b, and I can dump that into a temp file. And so let me just do temp.txt there, right? And then if I load up that, now I just have this complete list. And so what I can do is start to make the format here that will describe these. And so what I'm going to do is just make like a simple format I can use to put the information in that I wanted to put in about these. And so maybe I say something like, you know, there's a, maybe I say bitmap or something, like a source bitmap or something like that. I don't know, I probably don't need to say it's a source. Something like this, right? I guess I don't even really need an equals there. I can just say here's a source bitmap, block for floor grass, right? And, oh, actually, I guess that's wrong because this is the Handmade art directory. So these are actually the things we want to use for association. Let me back that up a little. So these are actually the things that we're going to use for association. So first, I actually want to do the other directory as well. So in here, let me go ahead and kill this buffer. Let me look at the other directory. So in sources base game, right? In here, what I want to do is all of those things in the art directory. I want those, again, to be a dir/b, so it does that, right? Let me go ahead and put those in temp.txt. And so now if I load those and I just grab those out, these are the ones that we're actually getting sources from. So now I can say, all right, there's a bitmap source, so load this thing. And then I want to say some stuff about it, right? And now, remember, we've got this is the information that we've got for it so far. And so what I want to do is kind of grab that stuff out and put that in here in some meaningful way. Now, we're going to have our work cut out for us because this file needs to be able to be resaved and all sorts of other stuff as well. So there's going to be trickiness here, certainly, as we kind of go forward. But that's just how things are going to go. So here's our block floor grass. We know that that is what we want to put in here. So this is basically the tags for this thing. So how we want to specify this, I don't necessarily know, but we can just do it probably something like this. right? And that's really it. So we might want other things in here as sort of a separate piece of information eventually. I don't actually know, but we can kind of look at that as we go further. So we've got 3 other things in here, and we can do all those as well. So here's another source, right? And, you know, maybe we should have named this, or the problem is this, it's not, 4Coder doesn't know that this is a code-based file, so it's not going to try and do anything to help us here with how this works. But that may be fine, but we may want to actually also, maybe we want this text file to actually be labeled with something else so that syntax highlighting and something can kick in. So maybe it shouldn't be basegame.txt. I don't know. That's kind of a question going forwards. How we want to deal with that. So anyway, if I take this a little bit more seriously here, so going forwards, let's look at what Block Orphanage 01 actually was. So Block Orphanage 01 is, I think, this. Yeah. So Block Wall Man-Made Wood Drywall is this one. And so those are the tags that were on here. Right. And then in here we've got some other ones. And so on. Now, one of the things that I'm not sure about is, does this actually just want to be called block? And so, right, because we kind of have this notion of that there's sources, block, body, character, cover, hand, head, right? So I don't know if maybe, do these want to be that way? Like, does this want to just be this? Probably. I think it might want to be. So, because the type is kind of special, right? And the tags are not as special. They are matching things. They don't affect the processing, really. These are just for information so that when the game wants to go grab assets, it uses those. This is actually like how the asset is loaded and processed. And so I think I want that to be more specific, right? So Orphanage 2 and 3 we had in here. These two. So it's the wood and the stone. So 2 is the wood. And 3 is the stone, right? 2 is the wood, 3 is the stone. So again, just copy those in here like so. And we don't need block anymore because it knows that from the type. Same here. So I think that seems pretty good to me, right? I think we can just use that. And that way we keep the file names the same. We can put all the markup in here that we need. So any other stuff that we need put in here, it'll just work. Yeah, I don't see much trouble with that. Seems pretty easy, right? So we have orphan bodies here. And we're going to have to figure out which all these are, because I don't remember what they all are, right? So we'll have to do that. And then we've got the... Oh, looks like I maybe deleted these a little too soon. Oh, no, I didn't. I left them in place. Somehow I was smart enough to not delete those. So I guess I was smart enough to only delete the orphan the character ones. All right, great. It's always nice to be smarter than you thought you were, because oftentimes you're dumber than you thought you were. So it's kind of the rare occurrence. All right, so let's see. Let's continue down this path. Let's get all these merged and saved off into a file, and then we'll parse the file. Probably won't have time for that today. We'll start on that tomorrow. And then we also have some work to do with exporting the existing markup that we have, which we didn't really do very much of, but we probably want to do that as well. Okay, so we've got the rest of these guys in here. I'm just going to go ahead and do the basic sort of getting them started And then we'll try to figure out who's who, because I don't really remember, which is a bit of an issue. I admit that. I apologize. But we'll just have to do it manually. Sometimes, well, not sometimes. There's a lot of times there's a bit of a grind to game development because you don't always get things right the first time. In fact, you rarely do. And so you have to be willing to kind of go back and redo things when there's, you know, a better way to do them. We don't need a character template in here, by the way, obviously, because that's just a lineup thing that we exported so we could re-reference it. So we've got ground cover in here. Let's see. I guess I can just kind of cut and paste this in here as well. Get all of those in there. And all of these in there. And now these are all the later part, right? This is the part that we were looking at in the X portion of things, right? So that's just here. And so these are just now for our advisement. Okay, so going forwards, also let me, while I'm at it, let me finish this part here. So let's put this in there. So, oops, those are not hands. Those are heads. And we'll put those in there. So those are all the heads of all the orphans. And finally, the miscellaneous stuff at the end. So here we've got the title screen, which honestly, the title screen I think should probably go with the intro stuff. So I don't really think the title screen should be in here. So I might suggest that we move that over into here instead, right? Now this, for stuff like the title screen, we have an import path for those that's a little bit different. It goes through like just kind of an arbitrary bitmap path. So I don't know what to call those exactly. Maybe a plate, I'm not sure, but they're kind of like, they're their own thing. So let's have to think about those. We maybe already had a name for them, so we'll look and see. So we got items in here, and then obstacles in here. And again, I don't really know if the word obstacles there, and item and head and cover and stuff, I don't know if those are all correct. They might be, they might not be. We got to go look at the importer and see what it wants to do. But again, the files here kind of tell us. So we did use, oh, and in fact, we did use the word plate. So I was right about that. I guess my intuition works the same in both cases. So if we kind of look at all of what these are here, now we just have to kind of figure out which one goes with which. So some of these are easier than others. Obviously in here, we've got like Fred, Hannah, and Molly. Those are our cat characters, and also Krampus. So those we can just use directly. So Cat, Berman, Ghost is Hannah, and so the tags on that are just Cat, Berman, and Ghost. And then the brown tabby is Fred. So that's pretty straightforward as well. The gray tabby is Molly, who you saw on stream if you saw the 4Coder streams. There we go. By the way, I guess I forgot to put the semicolon there. Now, why I put the semicolon in, I'm not sure. Just because I think I like to have things with semicolons at the end of them, having been a C programmer my entire life. But yeah. So anyway, coming back here, we've got Krampus, which doesn't have any tags besides just Krampus, apparently. So those are all good. And then we've got, yeah, some of these are pretty easy probably. So we just have hat 1, 2. Those look like they weren't tagged. So we don't really need to put any tags on these at all, I don't think, because we never tagged them. And Forest and Orphanage obstacles we didn't tag. We didn't tag the title screen. The templates obviously aren't relevant. The cover never got tagged. So we're really talking just about these here. So now we just kind of need to go look these up. Let's do the characters first. They probably are the easiest. So we've got skeleton, skeleton broken, skeleton dark, and mummy. So I'm assuming that this is wrapped, that this is dark, that this is broken, and this is bones there, right? And so those are pretty straightforward because they just happen to map directly. And like I said, those are easier than the characters, which we kind of named weird things and, you know, who knows. Oops. Oops. Need that. And so here we go with this. And done. Now, for hands, we've got fire, glove, and skeleton. So I'm assuming that fire is this one. I'm assuming that bones is this one, and that fingers is this one. So I think we can just do tags, undead, bones, dark. And here we can do tags, glove. Why didn't... That's weird. Shouldn't this be glove? Oh, it's not a glove. Right, never mind. It's just a hand that doesn't have a glove. So I take it back. It's not a glove. Right. So I think those should all be lined up now properly. And so we're just down to orphans now. And so those are the annoying ones because, like I said, they're kind of random. So body orphan hero, that's easier because we know which one's the hero since they're kind of special. So that would go in here, and that's easier. So this is tags. This is an orphan hero. And then we've also got the head orphan hero. So, you know, that should be able to be tagged as well. Right. So that's good. And now we need to correspond these ones that are more difficult, right? Oh, wait, no, there's one more we can do, which is baby. Oh, no, we can't. We have to actually look that one up. All right, so we just need to correspond these now and make these tagged properly. And so if I go in here and look at which ones are which, you can see like 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. I need to correspond those now to these. So I have to look, for example, head orphan 1. I have to look at which head that was. So here's the head orphans, and we can just go, oh, you know what I could probably do is sort by size. So if I sort by size, these will probably line up because the sizes are going to only line up, right? So if I go here and I scan down to the first time that I see one of the characters, right, character hero, I'm assuming that then I will get that same thing. Although, oh wait, character hero is not supposed to be there. That's a mistake, right? Because character hero should have been deleted. It's going to be inside head hero. So that's actually wrong. Did I delete? So I deleted almost all the correct character files, but I missed one. There we go. All right, so block. We know these correspondences. So we get down here to body orphan hero, body hero. We already did that one. So now let's scan down for the next one. Head orphan hero. We already did that one as well. Head hero. So then we've got head orphan Lambert and head orphan O2. Now they should be the same, and they are, right? So that's good. So O2 is Lambert. So head orphan Lambert. So I guess the only real tags here are orphan comma Lambert, and those are going to be the same on the body, I would assume, right? Because it's just body. Oh wait, no, the bodies are just completely different. We decided bodies don't go with heads anymore. All right, so that's O2. We've got character handler we don't need to know. We've got head orphan 06. So head orphan 06 is Klein. Oops. We then have head orphan Sunny. Why do these not... Shouldn't those line up differently? Where is block floor man-made stone? Why isn't that... Oh. How are those slightly different sizes? Is that creepy? I guess we resaved it from GIMP and it changed the size at some point. That was interesting. All right, so head orphan 01 is Sunny. What do we got next? Cassidy is 04. Then we got Carla, right? 03. And then we got head orphan 05. Wait, why did I say 05? No. 09 is Brahm. Did I spell that right? Yeah. Good. So then 12 is... Oh, but that's body. But that's okay. We can start doing bodies now. So body orphan Tank is 12. So this is tags equals orphan Tank, I think, right? Then orphan strength is 954. So 06 strength. Almost there. Then we've got head orphan Drew. That's 05. And then we've got a bunch of bodies. So we've got Earth, which is 01. Here we go. We've got Giles, who is 7. We've got Dylan, who is 12. Taylor. That's the body of 02, right? Yep. Let's see. This isn't taking as long as I'd feared. It's a little dry, but it's fine. Rhoda is 13. I assume I spelled that right. Yeah. Body orphan dark. So that's 05. Viva is 11. And Slade is 8. Oops, I was right there. Why did I leave? Oh no! But I already filled one in. I got Brahm wrong. How did I do that? It was 09. Right? I put it in 08. That was a mistake. It's supposed to be there. I think Slade is spelled that way, right? Did I not? Yes, I did. Okay. Where is Slade? Come back here. There we go. Okay, so then we've got Fauna Orphan 4. And what else? Cook Body is 03. So I'm not sure why some of these are 3 tab. Looks like I just for some reason indented some things 3. Yeah. So we're mostly bodies left. It looks like we've got almost all the heads. We're only missing 2 heads. We've got a fair bit of bodies left to go here. All right, so let's see. Body Orphan Cook, Hand Strings, Hand, Body Orphan Fall. So that's 11. So that's tags, Orphan Fall, oops, Orphan Fall, Spring is 9. You know what I should do? Just copy that, because I'm going to use it. So 7 is Winter. Speed is 14. Oops. I said I was going to use it and then didn't. And Summer is 13. We've got Laird at 14. And Baby is 10. And Health is 8. Oops. All right, I think we're almost done. Let's see. Yep, I think we're basically done. So then all we've got is 10 is Baby. There it is. And it looks like for some reason we didn't put the hero. Oh, it was because it's character hero. That shouldn't have been in there. So I think we've got everything now. I think that's it. So that's the entire markup that associates all the tags with the correct PNGs, right? And for the intro cutscene, again, we're going to have to put a bunch more plate files in here as sort of once we actually get those PNGs in, but you know, for now, we can ignore that. So if we've got those two, and we kind of come back here, so now we can see if we look at the Handmade sources directory, we can go to the base game, right? It's got this text file that says everything that's in there. We've got 3 directories we can put our stuff into that we want. And this title screen, I'm basically saying should get out of here, right? So that should actually go into the intro cutscene directory, like so, right? And this way, now what we can do when we ship the source stuff we upload to Sendowl can just be a pack of this source directory here, and then people can download that and use it. But we can also, like I said, keep the text files. Instead of packing those up, we can put those into a different directory, right? Now, I don't know exactly how we want that to go. There's another way we could do it, right? Which is that instead of putting those here, we could basically say like, oh, the Handmade sources directory, there's a, like the text files actually go somewhere else completely so that they don't overlap. So that the sources directory only includes this stuff, and like basegame.txt and intro cutscene.txt are elsewhere. But I don't feel like we probably want to do that, even though that's a little bit easier for us to package up every time we want to upload to Sendowl. It's actually not how you would want probably it for editing when you're actually just making the game data. You know what I mean? I would assume, or maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe because the text files are edited separately, maybe they should be somewhere else. I'm not sure. That's a good question. Do I like this better? So I don't really know. That part's a little bit trickier. And like I said, the problem with it is just that, you know, you want these text files to be things that are that we can change and not have to redistribute the art files on Sendowl again, because, you know, they're pretty big, right? You look at how much is in this base game directory, right? And it's like 60 megabytes. And so we don't really want to redistribute 60 megabytes of pings every time we make one change to the base game text file, which is, you know, 4K, because that can just be packed up and put in there. So, you know what? I think I am going to go and get ahead and do that just to make it a little bit easier. What I guess I'll do is say, okay, if we go out to Handmade, let's say that these go somewhere else here. And then they can get checked into source code control as well. And so maybe, you know, we have something here that's like markup or whatever, right? You know, or tags. So that way we have a sources and a tags directory, and this and they're separate, right? And that way this can just get checked into source code control, and this sources directory can be distributed as the separate thing that you download. So everything else gets packed up every day, but the sources don't because they're just too big. You know what I mean? And then we would just vaporize the art directory, right? The art directory just goes away entirely. And we just don't touch that anymore. I think that's pretty good, right? I also would say that I don't necessarily know, like what we want to do with the data directory long term. And I guess we just kind of vaporize all this stuff eventually as well, but we'll see. So I think that's more sane. I think that's how I would like to do it. And we've got a couple different things we need to do to make that happen. I don't know where we are on time. I think I started, so I've got about 7 minutes left, I think. So I don't know that I really want to do too much more today. But what we can do is take a quick look at what we're going to do when we actually come back and tomorrow and start on this stuff. So if I go ahead and open up the Handmade Hero source code and we look at the sorry, not the art. We look at the asset directory. I'm sorry, the asset loader source code. So, like I said before, inside here, you know, these art assets get written back. This write modifications to HHA part is the thing that allows us to do edits, and then those things get saved. And so, what we need to be able to do in addition here to the write modifications to HHA file is we're going to have to now be able to maintain this that text file, right? So in here, you know, when we've got the in here where we've got these tags that we're putting on there, we need to be able to maintain that file. Now, there's two ways we can do this. One way we can do it is to write an additional file. So we can actually put in here, instead of ever overwriting our base game.txt file, which is something that we've edited and set up for the tags that we want to apply to each individual bitmap file that comes in, we can either make something that rewrites one of these and, you know, puts the additional stuff in there, or we can make it so that it outputs a separate one, right? And the separate one has the additional things in it that we've changed when we do our write modifications. I don't know which of those we really want to do. It seems like if we're going with a single text file, we might want to just rewrite it. So it would just rewrite the one that we have and go from there. So again, kind of tricky. And I might say, you know, and so we've got this notion of like the alignment points and all that sort of stuff. And it seems like we probably just want all that stuff to just go directly in here. I mean, why not? And so when we do that, I think we probably just want to rewrite this file. And so in addition to doing write modifications to HHA, what we're going to have to do in here is open up the text file, the tags file for this, and you know, and write that out. So another thing we could do here is say that, you know, maybe these files themselves are called tags files. You know, we could do that. Or we could say, like, you know, make a special thing. So we've got an HHA. This maybe is like a handmade hero tag file or something like that, which is a different thing. You know what I mean? And so that we can recognize what they actually are, as opposed to saying a text file, which really could be anything. We know that the format is ASCII, but it's not really a text file in the sense that it's not an arbitrary, like a CPP file is also a text file, right? But that's not exactly true. So if I go in here, I might want to associate this with like Notepad or something, right? So that we can actually look at these, you know, like that. I don't know, I thought Notepad, I have to update this Windows 10 machine or try to. I thought Notepad, wasn't it supposed to be able to handle Unix line endings one of these days? I thought that was something they were adding. I don't know how to get that, but I'd like it. So anyway, I'd like to be able to probably rewrite those. And so I think what we'll probably start by doing is we'll make something that imports that and does the tagging properly. So we'll update our import routine here. And then for the export routine, what we'll do is we'll continue the thing that we had before where we... Oh, and you know what? That would also give us a place to set our author, right? So this we could actually fix now, right? Remember, if we go into the HHAs, if we take a look here, if you look at these HHAs, we have the HHA edit program, and that can give us the info on one of these things, like you know, like this. And one of the things that's in the annotations, if we say like dump one of these guys, it tells us a bunch of things like the descriptions and who the author was. In the case of some of the newer assets, like the local HHA, when we look at those assets, what we can see is that the annotation stuff is kind of set somewhat haphazardly. Like there's an author, but there's no description. And so that stuff is also things that could actually get solved by those tag files. Because now we could put any of that markup that we wanted in there, we could put. So for example, in here, you know, what we could say is we could say like global or something like default. So everybody gets this. So we could say like author is Anna Repberg, right? You know, actually, And so that way, like, the author and description for these particular assets can get set to something reasonable, so that if you were going to be looking at them in the future and you just got this HHA file and you had no idea what it was supposed to be, if you actually looked at the contents of the HHA file, it would tell you where it came from, and you know, that it was art from Anna. As opposed to if somebody handed you another HTA file made by like some buddy out there who's, you know, doing some mods to Handmade here or something like that, and put together a separate HTA file, they could put together author and description things. And then each one of these could override the author and description if you wanted to, but of course in most cases you wouldn't really need to, because most of the time I assume that the art packs won't be heterogeneous in that way. So I think this is better. I think we should go with this, and we'll implement that tomorrow. It won't be that much of a change. It's just a slightly better system than what we had. And then we can finally call it really done, because then we've got a way of building everything from scratch anytime we want, and we have a clean distribution model, so we know what we're doing. And so I think, like, we've done our homework here. We've explored a bunch of options, and I think we've got something pretty good. Let me go ahead and do some Q&A here. Let's switch back here. And we'll see. So do we have any questions? When utilizing the entity scheme you mentioned in the pre-stream, the single inheritance scheme, how would you implement functionality to allow modding of the game's existing entities and the code handling them, such as a physics overhaul mod, which replaces the physics system in the game? Well, so there's a couple different things about that, which I think are semi-orthogonal. But so in terms of implementing modding, I don't really prefer single inheritance, so I wouldn't use the phrase single inheritance to say what I was talking about. John usually prefers to do single inheritance as his way of implementing just single type entities, right? Meaning an entity has a type, which his does have. So they happen to be implemented with he likes having the compiler generate the jump table for him. Don't ask me why. He just does. Okay? His prerogative. You know, he's shipped 2 of the best games of all time, so I'm not going to argue with it. But I would never really bother with that part. I would just use the type and then make a dispatch table if that's what I wanted. But, you know, but either way, they're basically the same design. So if you're using that particular design and you want to mod it, all you do is when somebody ships the DLL that's the mod, they just say, I override the handling. You know, in that mod, it's got the table of what functions you provide. And you're like, oh, I provide the handler for entity type blah. And then instead of calling the existing code for entity type blah, it calls the mod code for entity type blah, right? And furthermore, you can compose those if you want, meaning the system can allow you to dispatch to the old code if you wanted to, right? So if the mod code just wants to do one thing and then dispatch to the old code for that entity, it can just do that. That's not hard, right? So again, pretty simple. And John would have a slightly harder time implementing that than I would, because since I use just type and dispatch table, it's easier for me to work with. In his case, it would be a little bit harder because he'd have to, because he's using the virtual function table, he has to kind of still work with C++'s broken inheritance system, but he could still do it, right? If you asked him to make that code, he wouldn't go, oh my God, I have no idea how. He'd be like, okay, sure. And he'd go do something similar to what I just described, but with the inheritance system, right? Or maybe he would say, okay, at that point, inheritance isn't a good idea. I'll just use the type, the type, same exact thing, but the typed way that Casey just described, right? Like maybe he would switch at that point. I don't know. As far as replacing the physics system, physics is a system that runs outside the entity system, right? Because it has to handle the interactions of entities. So typically what ends up happening is you don't have an entity system that has the physics baked into it anyway. So you're going to, it's sort of like asking how do you need to architect your entity system so that the renderer can be replaced. It's like, it doesn't really make sense. Because physics as a plugin architecture, if you want to have the physics solver be a plugin, that's fine. Because usually what entities do is they just articulate their rigid body and continuum dynamics out in some way. and then the physics system runs those steps. Typically, the only interface that you see between an ND system and the physics system is the articulation of the rigid bodies. So like, here's where the things are going to start. And then the simulation then reports back like what collided, and the ND system can operate on that as a result, right? But really, the physics system shouldn't really be baked in the ND system no matter what its architecture is. That's probably a bad sign if you're doing that, right? So I don't think that's really part of the question. So what does WinDBG do better than Visual Studio's debugger? Have you thought about using it in the interim between now and when Remedy's ready? So WinDBG does some things better and some things worse. Basically, the things they do worse are workflow related. They have a lot of problems with like hotkeys not being bind to stuff. They don't hunt for PDB files very effectively. They don't load symbols at the times you would want them to load them. They wait till they do like delay loading and stuff, so you can't resolve breakpoint names. It's just a lot of stuff that they have problems with in WinDBG. It's better in terms of the debuggers. It's a lot more features. It's a lot easier to do stuff like use like a symbol server, or to control how symbols are being loaded at a finer grained level, or to look at what things are being loaded and stepping through there and figuring out how that stuff gets bound. You can also force loading of a PDB to the file easily and say, I want to use this PDB even though it doesn't match. Like, all that stuff just works because it's got a command line that allows you to do all that stuff. It's got time travel debugging, so if you want to, you can turn on recording and say, oh, I hit a bug and now I want to go back in time to like way back before the bug triggered and see what happened. It can do that. It's got the ability to do like remote debugging a lot more cleanly, and kernel debugging and all these sorts of stuff. It's got like a lot more pro features along those lines. There's tons of stuff in the command line that you can do in terms of just, basic debug inspection stuff. You can do things like look at what the process list is as if it were like C structures and ask questions about it and all these sorts of things. So it's just a better architected debugger just all around. It's just much better. The only problem is it just doesn't have good workflow, and they don't really seem to be serious about making the workflow better. They sort of are making some overtures. I tried to maybe like post some feedback. It didn't really go particularly well. I don't think they care that much about really actually making it easy to use and smooth. I shouldn't say easy, but fast to use and smooth. It's just they don't seem to get that yet, and so I don't know if they ever will. Maybe they will. If they do, it could be useful. At the moment, it's still pretty rough. It's a lot like Remedy in that there's some things that I would just consider I can't quite switch to this yet for WinDBG, but it's all right. On this machine, I wouldn't bother because we've already got Visual Studio and it works just fine. So it's fine. I'll probably just hold out for Remedy. Getting a bit fancy here, but do you think it'd be handy to have scope defaults in the HHT so you could have multiple defaults in a file, each of which has its own scope? I mean, it might be handy. I don't know that I would really want to bother, but it might be. Like, for example, you might say, oh, let me make a tags equals orphan default and then put all the orphan stuff in there, right? That seems totally reasonable. There's two ways you could do that. You could just reset the defaults right here, like this, and then later you'd set them to something else. And then you could delete the orphan from all of these. I don't know if we care about that yet or not. It's not a bad thing. I just don't know if it's really save us much. I'm not averse to it, though. I mean, it could save time. It could be useful. I don't know. Do you know you could use the D1 report time flag for CL to see where the compiler spends the time? No, actually, I didn't know that. Is it actually useful? So you're saying I can just say that? Oh my god. Okay. I mean, I don't know what to make of this. I guess it's sort of... it's a little much. You know what I'm saying? I mean, mostly what it tells me is what I already know, which is Windows and the standard library are a complete disaster and ruin everything, including your compile time. I mean, most of the stuff on here isn't ours. Why are we even seeing things called SOAP method inside our compile time, which has nothing to do with that, right? This is why, like, in my actual code base at Molly Rocket, we don't allow any includes or libraries at all, period. Because it's just garbage, right? It's just garbage. So really all that does is make me sick. I'm not sure I would want it turned on very often. But yeah, like just including Windows.h or including the C runtime library, it's just a disaster. You know, it's a disaster. It's bad code, and it clogs up everything. But yeah, that does seem nice, right? You know, maybe I'll put that in here if we ever want to look at it again. Oops. Just so we remember the flag, because it's a little bit of a non sequitur. Just tuck that in there. But yeah, I mean, God, you just look at how much crap Windows and it's like, you know, Microsoft, you added a flag to the compiler to tell me that your code is crap, right? Like, but I already knew that, so yeah. You might as well just call that flag minus confirm the fact that Microsoft's libraries are crap. And it could just print out yes. It's like we're done with queues. All right, I think we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Alrighty. There we go. Thank you everyone for joining me for the episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. I'm excited to kind of get this stuff wrapped up because it'll be kind of nice to just have everything in a nice little package and you'd be like, hey, look, it really works. If you want to follow along with the code at home, obviously, and kind of what we talked about a little bit today in terms of getting that cleaned up, you can always pre-order the game on handmadehero.org, and it comes with all the source downloads. And those will soon be even easier to use. It looks like they're pretty easy to use right now because I did upload the latest HHA stuff, so you can kind of start where we are today and not really have any issues. And the README files are up to date now, so it should be pretty easy for people to get started. But we'll be making that even better as we go because I think we can kind of transition to a pretty clean scheme now that'll make a lot of sense. So anyway, that's it for today. I'll be back here tomorrow when we'll do some of that text input-output stuff just to get that part of the pipeline cleaned out. Yeah, that should be about it. And then we can move on to maybe we'll just throw sound in while we're at it. Because we kind of got to clean up the way that stuff gets managed in the memory management now that we simplified those things. Maybe we'll do that before we go finish the lighting. In the home stretch, though, people, feeling pretty good about it. Engine's looking pretty sweet. All right, hope to see you back here tomorrow. Till then, have fun programming. I'll see everyone on the internet. Take it easy, everybody.